Do you know whether or not the fiber optics proposal that the governor proposed, the $10 million proposal, does that require legislative action of any kind?
I am not certain on that, but I believe what he's talking about is speeding up the ORNet, and that certainly would not require legislative action. Opening it up to businesses, we will have to check into that. I'm sure there's been some research done on that, but the idea is, that is the new infrastructure for today. May have been, while we need the highways and we need the bridges, you also have to have high-speed internet, and certainly ORNet is a tremendous asset that we want to make sure that we utilize for economic development in the state.
Senator, do you favor his suggestion that we privatize the Brent Spencer Bridge?
Well, I think what I heard him say, Paul, was we ought to look at having the private sector involved. And I think that's part of the discussion at the federal level because, frankly, they're trying to figure out how to come up with the billions of dollars to pay for it. So I don't know that the governor specifically talked about privatizing it, but I think in terms of the turnpike and in terms of Brent Spence, but specifically in terms of the turnpike, he said, let's study it and let's make sure we know what the options are. And I think that's a prudent way to move. As far as the Brent Spence Bridge, I don't think he said he wanted to privatize it, but he wanted to get the private sector involved. But that also would be as much a federal issue as it would a state issue. And if we can get private capital involved to help defray the cost of the taxpayers, I think that would be a good thing. We would just have to figure out how to do that.
Senator, one of the points that some of your Democratic colleagues are already making, this was a feel-good speech in some ways, but very short on detail. Especially as you brought up the turnpike issue, brought up safety issues for the Marcellus and Utica shale play. If either of you gentlemen can address what some are seeing as some shortcomings on detail.
Well, first of all, this was a state of the state. So you talk about what exists today. And as part of that, you talk about what the vision is for the future. There are parts of this process that involve more than just the governor. And I think what he laid out was a vision for the things he wanted to address. But members of the Senate and the House will have a lot to say about what things get done over the next 11 months. And so what I took the governor's comments for was laying out that broad agenda, recognizing the role that those of us who were elected into the Senate or the House play in moving that agenda forward. So frankly, I like that approach because it gives us the opportunity to represent our constituents in the process.
That's well said, and I think some of the matters that you discussed obviously will not be uncontroversial, and therefore when you start talking about the turnpike in the region of the state that I represent, there are a lot of feelings up there about what ought to be done in that area or not done. One of the very serious things that we face as a nation is the infrastructure issue, which frankly, based on the gas taxes that's coming in now, is going to continue to be a big issue. So it seems to me that he was touching on things that are going to have to be studied before we do anything with them, and obviously there's going to have to be legislative input. All 99 members of the House are going to be up in a short period of time.
Regarding gas severance taxes, do you have any response to the discrepancies between the severance taxes and the production numbers reported for the state?
I'm not sure what you're referring to about the severance taxes and the production numbers. I'm not familiar with what you're talking about.
There's a discrepancy between how much severance taxes were collected over the past 10 years versus how much production was reported to the state. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of the details of it, but apparently the Department of Natural Resources is, and I'm certain that the Department of Taxation would be as well. But I don't have those details.
The Governor and Chancellor Petro's sort of Enterprise Plus University plan really, to me, seems directed more towards individualized operations. So beyond what former Chancellor Fingerhat did with regard to the university system, what do you specifically do to make all these individual entities, more of a system? I didn't hear any real specifics. And what is that going to look like other than a capital bill that supposedly is going to bring them all together?
One good thing would be if our students who go to the school for 3 years and then transfer somewhere else are allowed to take their transferred credits with them and not end up going to school for 5 years as a result of present practices of some of the universities. That would be for openers. I don't mean to suggest that the governor spoke to that except indirectly, But there are a number of those kinds of issues out there, and obviously that will require hearings to develop a strategy that will prepare us to respond to those problems that exist in the higher ed area.
Speaker,
From I guess what I heard was that was the capital bill was an example of how he expects the universities to work together. So this was sort of the first opportunity for them to collaborate and come to us with one voice and present a proposal that represents more than just the interest of their specific institution, but collectively what they see is benefiting the entire state.
I was going to ask about the Cleveland Education Reform Plan that uses merit pay and de-emphasizes seniority with layoffs. Do you support that?
Well, generally speaking, I think there's a great deal of support for that in the House of Representatives. Obviously, at this point, the mayor has done a remarkably courageous thing in stepping forward, and we're going to want to work with him on that. This is a time in the Cleveland Public Schools. I think we're now at 39,000 registered students up there. The decline of the registration there is some indication that people are looking for changes and differences. So I think that that comes together with what we've done. I have not talked to the mayor. He was kind enough to call me yesterday, and I was out of touch. So I'm looking forward to visiting with him about that.
And as far as the Cleveland education plan that you asked about, I have not been briefed by the mayor. We did talk for a few moments yesterday. We were trying to set up a conference call, but I think the governor said it well, and this is consistent with what we said after the November election, and that is, if the local communities want to come to us with their ideas and they want to show support, we want to listen. And I think what the mayor has done, he has come forward with an idea. He says he has had people at the table talking about this. And so I think what the governor said during his presentation today was, let's have the Cleveland community come together and say, this is what we want. We want to argue for changes in our schools. And so what I'm looking for my members is that support from the Cleveland community that says we want change, we're willing to listen.
Maybe it's just addressing the specificity issue again, but what specific use as legislative leaders use? What are you taking from this speech? Say, okay, we're going back to Columbus, and this is going to be top of the agenda after hearing this speech. This is what we have to do now specifically.
Well, I'll go back to my earlier comments, workforce development. Work closely with Rich Frederick, who the governor has appointed to head up the workforce development issue. Collecting this myriad of programs into one entity or one cohesive program that addresses the needs of specific communities. And so we have a number of senators already working on legislation to try to tailor programs for workforce development. But as you try to collect all these different programs, you want to take the best parts of each one and use those and scale them up then to be available throughout the state. So what I'll be taking back is emphasis on workforce development, emphasis on making sure that our community colleges are closely aligned with the business community so that we are producing the graduates that have the skills that the business community needs for them to continue to expand in Ohio.
We had a committee in the field this summer into fall. Actually, they had to go longer than they originally been asked to do on the subject of workforce preparation, clarity, and those kinds of things. One of the problems that we have is the federal government, and they have, I think, 53 different programs. And I had the privilege of visiting with the chairman of the committee in charge of that, and I would have to say that I don't think they have a clear vision, with all due respect to the chairman. I don't think they have a clear vision of how much focus is required in training folks who have not really done very well in secondary schools, and now here they are faced with something further. I think it's important that the Derrickson report that we received in the fall, that Tim was the chairman of that committee, I think it's important that that be looked at by everyone, and that we continue to talk to people in the business sector who understand what it is that they need. It's kind of shocking that we have 70,000 jobs available in Ohio and people are not taking those jobs. And that's something that I'm not sure what all that measures. I know some of the things it measures are not good for our society in the sense that we have people who are not able to pass a drug test, for example, that sort of thing. But this is something we have been working on, focused on, and the governor has as well. And I think it's one of the most important things that we're going to be doing in this next session. We've got to get people trained to go back to work.
Time for one more question.
Are there any discussions in the majority caucuses or with the governor's office, however informal they might be, about a P20 Department of Education, which is something that Chancellor Petro has brought up more than once?
I have not been part of any conversations. I'm not aware of any at this point. They may have made some initial inquiries with at the staff level, but I've not been part of any of those conversations.